Hello, welcome to Critical Witness, and this is our 200 subscriber celebration evening where we have these wonderful people with us. Dan, London Theist, also known as Dean, the heretic, and Andy Kind, who's dressed up for this occasion. Welcome to this wonderful evening that we have obviously well planned and rehearsed and know exactly what's going to happen. Exactly. There we go. So we've got some questions. We have got a few questions. We've got some people kindly, anonymously added in some questions that we can start discussing. But if you are watching live, currently, apparently there's two of you. Feel free to ask questions as we go. And otherwise, this is just going to be five guys having a bit of fun and a bit of banter. So before we begin, maybe we can spend a couple of minutes, because although Andy and London Theist, also known as Dean from here on out, have their own stream, this is the first time Craig has joined us. So I'm gonna zoom in on Craig. Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into some questions.
Okay. Well, as you know, my name is Craig. That's how you always have to start these things. I grew up in a sort of very nominally kind of Christian family. We went to church, we went to church a bit when I was quite young. That just kind of fizzled out, really. I wasn't at all interested in Christianity until my teens, and then I became very anti-Christian, a bit of a miserable atheist kind of person. As I got older, I kind of developed a bit of a drinking problem that then became a serious drinking problem that then became full-blown alcoholism. And I lost quite a few years of my life to that, really. And then I don't know how many years I'd been sort of living in the bottom of a vodka bottle. Somebody who I didn't really even know arranged for some people from a Christian rehab to come and see me and try and talk to me and sort of talk about how they'd been released from addiction to heroin and things. And I just thought they were idiots, to be honest. So after a while, I sort of turned it over in my head and I thought, well, they're kind of offering to help me. I don't want any of this God nonsense, but, maybe they can sort of give me a bit of help and I can get off the drink, because I knew by then if I didn't stop, I was going to be dead within a couple of years. I developed epilepsy as well after a blood clot on my brain, which was fun. So I had brain surgery. I had epilepsy. I had quite a few other health problems. I sort of struggled a bit with my mental health and things as well. So I went into a Christian rehab with the intention of being there for a sort of a couple of weeks to get off the drink and then get out. And as long as they didn't give me any of their God stuff. And much to my surprise and everybody else's surprise, after a couple of months, I got saved. So I sort of stayed involved with a church that they were connected to. When was that? 2010. And I was there for quite a while. After a bit, I suppose I should sort of throw in 136 apologetics thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please
After
do.
quite a few years, I sort of got a bit interested in apologetics, mostly from talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, which is sort of my main desire, really, to reach out to them. But I went to a Ravi Zacharias Ministries open day in London, and I was in the queue and I was talking to some Americans in front of me, and they were saying, look, over in America, like the whole apologetics thing, it's just part of Christian culture. They've got radio stations, they've got broadcasts, they've got, every church has got apologetics ministry and things. And to me, that was mad, because I had to travel all the way to London from a tiny little town in South Wales, where I'm living at the moment. And I just thought, well, why can't we have something like this in Wales then? Why have you got to come all the way to London? So I kind of turned it over in my head for a while, and I thought, well, I'm not an expert in apologetics. 136 apologetics isn't me being awesome at apologetics and having loads of degrees and things. Originally, it was, I want to set up events. Money's going to change hands. To do it legally, it's either going to have to be a charity or it's going to have to be a business. I don't want it to be a business. I don't want people to think I'm trying to make money from it. So I set it up as a charity, which was a months and months of agonizing grappling with them and things. So I set it up as a charity. My main interest remained Jehovah's Witnesses, and it still does now, but I kind of organized some events and things. I ended up speaking at the first one because my plan was get some speakers in the trustees for the charity is a sort of real encourager, and he said, "No, you can do one. You can." I thought, yes, I can do one. Yes. So I ended up the first one trying to speak about the deity of Christ before the Council of Nicaea, and then it just kind of went on from there. Really, I mean, I don't want to steal the whole broadcast or anything like that, but 136 Apologetics is primarily the charity organization. So there you go.
Awesome. It's great to have you with us. London Theist talked for an hour and a half with us, or was it 2 hours? Did we hit 2 hours?
That was 2 hours, I think.
It was 2 hours, yeah. Andy Kind was 3?
No, it was 2. I think 2 hours and 10 minutes.
2 hours and 10.
So I know someone who watched the whole thing.
You?
No, it wasn't. Well, no, of course me. But also, one of our viewers tonight also watched the whole thing of me. So
nice.
Yeah.
So at least one. I mean, it was early days for our channel. Obviously, we weren't quite at the heady days of 200 subscribers. So we'll be gentle. But Craig, you've got some making up to do. Obviously, you've got at least 2 hours worth of.
Right. Okay. I'm ready. I've got the big coffee. I'm set. I'm good to go.
Keep it light, Craig. Keep it light.
We've got to pick ourselves off that one. It was a amazing testimony. So yeah, that's good stuff. And I think you're the one that's ready to answer the Trinity question, aren't you?
Oh, wonderful.
You've lined yourself up for that one.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful.
Well, Dan's ready as well. He's been prepping for this tonight.
I haven't.
Shall we go for a first question?
Yeah.
Go on. Then.
Go on. All right. So this one could be quite interesting. What are the weakest arguments for the existence of God that you have personally used?
Oh, that is interesting, isn't it?
Have to think back some.
Pile in when we want to go, or
what's that, Craig?
There was an argument that I used that I then later found out wasn't as strong as I thought it was, and it wasn't specifically about the existence of God. It was for the trustworthiness of Christianity.
Right.
Slightly different. I used to be very fond of the kind of argument that Christianity Jesus really must have been resurrected, because pretty much all of the disciples were willing to die rather than recant on their beliefs. And I used that for a while, and then I found out that we don't necessarily know that to be true. We know that Paul was executed. We know that Peter was executed. We know that James, his brother, was executed. I think the only other thing that we're sure of is Thomas. I could be wrong on that, but I used to think that pretty much all of them were executed for it, and now it turns out that we're not quite so sure. I think they were all persecuted, but not all executed for definite. That's the only one that I've used that then I found out wasn't as strong as I thought it was.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. That's the question that's come through. The weakest arguments for the existence of God you've personally used are the arguments you have put forward that you don't actually think hold weight. I think I'll give that one as well, Craig. Sorry, go on, Andy.
Well, if I'm honest, I'll just now I'm on the big screen. I can adjust my hat a little bit.
There you go.
The thing is that my camera is inverted weirdly, so like this reindeer is on the other side of where I actually am in real life.
It does take a little while to get used to.
Should I put my bubble? Hang on, where's my bubble? There we are. Put my bubble at the front.
That's lovely.
I bought this today specifically for this event because I thought, if Craig's going to be, talking about his past, I need to kind of balance that with a So I think certainly when I first became a Christian, I used a lot of arguments from experience and personal perception, and I think those are very good personal testimonies. So I had an experience, and I think those are really good for Christians, and I think they're interesting in terms of sharing a narrative and sharing your story. But in terms of actual apologetics, saying that you had an experience or you saw a light or whatever, it's a bad argument. It's not convincing unless someone is already invested in your narrative. So, and I think that goes the same for talking about healings and things like that. I go out on the street a lot, or did before, back on old Earth, and pray for healing for people a lot, and we see stuff happen. But I don't use that to convince people of the truth of Christianity, because again, it comes across as hearsay, doesn't it? So for me, that would be a weak, I think, a real powerful testimony for Christians and for people interested in Christianity when they see it live. But in terms of apologetics, a bad argument, a weak argument.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's both, it's strong in ways, but weak in others. Because it's weak in the sense that when you then start getting into a competition with, a Muslim and a Mormon about, all your experiences, about how you've been sort of transformed, and your life's been sort of reorientated from your particular different religious experiences, then it becomes weak. But in a way, it is strong. There are, just what Craig was talking about, like his experience of, and the same with mine. Like, you're living one way, and then you are literally transformed. Like, your mind, desires are radically transformed from one direction to another. And there is something that's incredibly powerful about, it's like when a lot of atheist friends say, oh, well, Christianity doesn't change you, and you're all hypocrites and stuff like that. And it's like, well, okay, for every one person that changing their belief to an atheist radically transformed them, I'll give you 1,000 who were drug dealers, beating their girlfriends up, whatever, all the worst.
1,000 people who beat up their girlfriend.
You got to get some better friends there, Dan.
No, Andy, I do not know 1,000 people who beat their girlfriends up. Thankfully, they're all transformed now. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can easily come up with numerous people, whose lives are radically transformed in a way that's meaningful and beneficial not only to the individual but to society as a whole as well. And that there is something powerful about that testimony as well, but it's weak when you're sort of engaging competition between different testimonies.
Absolutely. Or when it's second hand. So I think your life is your greatest apologetic. I totally agree with that. But I think when we're simply trying to debate third parties, talking about something that happened to a friend of yours in China 10 years ago or whatever, that's when it becomes a little bit pie in the sky.
To make it a bit stronger, like in terms of just if you're talking like a strict naturalist, and you're saying, look, billions of people around the world have religious experiences. Even it's obviously weaker when you compare it Muslim and Christian, like you said. I completely agree. Yeah. But if you've got this argument, well, if on theism and on Christianity, it's more likely religious experience makes sense, because they could say, oh, mental health or this is causing that, but it's very unlikely that billions across billions of people are having these experiences. So I think it can be a strong point just against like a strict naturalist, maybe.
Absolutely.
And then I think, sorry to hog it,
go for it.
These are my real ears, by the way. Then I think that, you see, my major approach in apologetics and preaching is always to find out what the person I'm talking to is willing to accept anyway. So if you find someone who believes in religious experiences or has had some kind of spiritual experience, then I think then it becomes really compelling, because you can then draw a line of best fit to the gospel. But I think a lot of the people that we've all spoken to and maybe used to be ourselves would be people who are just very happy to say, no, everyone who's had a religious experience is just deluded or psychotic or whatever. So you want to in terms of your opponents, by which I mean the person you're talking to, you want to use their weight against them, don't you? You want to find out what it is that they already prepared to accept, and then show that the Lord and the gospel make the best sense of what they already believe.
It's like apologetics jiu-jitsu.
It is, yeah.
So I think talking about the worst argument has to go to when I was in primary school, I vaguely recall a conversation with someone saying that you should believe in God because otherwise he might smite you. I don't recall him repenting on the spot. But
Strange.
Yeah, I mean, I've changed my tactics slightly in the few years since then, but yeah, that would probably be my weakest argument for the existence of God. Although I think I was kind of going down the lines of Pascal's wager. That's my version of it. Any other weak arguments been used? That's the question at the moment.
I think what you said there, Phil, I've always found, I've only been a Christian like 18 months, as I said before. I think like the street preachers who are very much hellfire preaching, like in London when you get on towards Oxford Street and there's just this guy in the corner screaming at you that you're going to hell if you don't accept Jesus Christ, your Lord and Saviour. It's not so much an argument, but it's just a real aggressive way of preaching the gospel. And it put me off, and I just thought, look at this person. Like, it's not saying I don't think that has a higher success rate. I can't imagine that style. It's really off-putting, I find. So,
and I mean, if people are going to respond to that, you've got to question: are they responding for the right reasons, or anything anywhere near the right reasons? It's like, oh well, you've scared me into this. Well, it's not really heartfelt repentance, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We end up a sort of competition about what religious belief can construct the worst possible negative outcome for post-death. You know, so you can always like one up, can't you? Like, well, this one's gonna, this, 1,000 angry badgers are going to be poking you in the eye, for 1,000 years, and then the beavers will start. You can construct like the worst possible one. It's like, well, if you're gonna embrace a particular religious belief, because it's just, you should believe this one because it's an even worse outcome.
Yeah.
And then there's a great banquet, but as a main course they just serve soup.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Trying to have those spoons. So this is totally random. Did any of you have like I'm sure it's some popular Christian idea of like heaven and hell, but there was I don't even know if it's like Pilgrim's Progress or something, but the idea of heaven or hell has all these really long knives and forks,
they've got like it's like big long bamboo things, and they're sort of trying to flip chickens up in the air and eat them.
Yeah, and you're trying to feed yourself with these ridiculously long cutlery.
Yeah.
And then heaven is everyone's feeding each other. I'm glad you know what I'm talking about, Craig.
That rings a bell.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No.
So yeah, hell is just ridiculously long cutlery, and when Andy kindly mentioned soup, I was just had this really weird image of really long soup spoons trying to feed yourself.
It's actually a fork. You're trying to eat soup with a fork.
With a fork.
That's to make it worse. You can always make it worse.
We can always make it worse. Any worse arguments than that?
No, the argument from soup is the worst by far.
Eating soup with a long fork doesn't get. That's what you can do. Other religions, can you beat that?
Yeah,
It sounds like something off a Jack Chick track. Like those.
It probably is.
That sounds like that's probably where it's from.
Yeah,
but also, like, it's not working our favour either, because actually what we're saying is our worst version of hell is a non-stop buffet. Well, people want that. That's what they want.
Well, that's what I mean. That it is like in a way that's true, because in some ways, like, another people think all the fun's to be had in hell. Like, so that comes from somewhere, doesn't it? So somewhat Christians at some point culturally have presented something to people that actually I want to go there, not because of God, but that's where all the fun will be. So there's definitely been some sort of miscommunication somewhere along the line.
But that is actually an apologetic argument, though, isn't it? That hell is just the end result of what people want. So maybe people.
Why do you always end up talking about hell?
It's your fault. You guys
Loved it.
hold on.
You didn't even start on this. You've got a problem. You know, every time we do anything, it's like, oh,
You started talking about badgers and beavers and hell.
Yeah, to be fair, Dan, you started it.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I appreciate that.
bad argument. I'll be honest with you. I'm a bit ashamed to admit. Should I admit it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. When I first became a Christian, for a little while, it might have been just a matter of weeks, but I thought I came to this. There are reasons for it. I'm not going to get into it, but I thought that you couldn't be a Christian unless you were a young Earth creationist, right?
Wait, you can't.
I know. Yeah, and so I think that's one of the worst arguments. It's like, well, like
just lost a couple viewers there, Dan. Just
I know but like because it's used as sort of this argument for God is that actually, that the origin story you've been sold by secular culture is false, and the answer is that humans used to play with dinosaurs and the universe is only sort of 6,000 years old, and that's used as an argument for God, and you would appeal to the fossil record and a global flood and things like that, and that is actually an argument that people make for God. So, and I think at least for a little while I did think that was a good argument to use.
That was a powerful moment for you, Dan. I'm glad that you shared that.
Thank you. Thank you. It is. It's.
Was that quite cathartic for you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it did. It was very cathartic. Yeah, I feel like a load has been lifted off.
I almost feel like we should all hug now. We've got distance, haven't we? So,
it's the problem.
Yeah. Everyone hug your monitor.
Okay, so should we move on to the next question before we get all vulnerable and huggy? Here we go. Is the next one? Why are you not Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? I mean, that's a bit presumptuous, but I guess I don't have the beard for Eastern Orthodox.
What have you been reading?
Every Eastern Orthodox person that I know has a really long beard. That's where that comes from. I haven't met an Eastern Orthodox person without a beard yet, so that kind of shows how many Eastern Orthodox people I've actually met in person at the moment. Not very many.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because probably most of us wouldn't, if we were asked to, these are not fake, these are fake ears. If we were asked to describe what it was that we were, we probably wouldn't say Protestant either. So why are you not Catholic? I don't think of myself as Protestant particularly. I'm a follower of Jesus or disciple or whatever. Radical meaning root Christian. So that would be my primary answer. And I suppose if I wanted to be picky, I would say that I don't find the idolization of Mary terribly compelling. I don't find the priesthood of pretty much no believers terribly compelling. But equally, in terms of Anglicanism, if that's the other person in bat, well, I don't find Anglicanism terribly convincing in some of its methods either. So yeah, that would be my
careful. Dean's an Anglican.
Going back to the Mary stuff is interesting because I think one of the things that I imagine, I don't know, will we all class ourselves as, I don't know, I don't really like labels. It's cool not to like labels as well. But like evangelicals, would people think of themselves under that sort of umbrella-ish more than they would a Protestant, I suppose.
In a British sense, I'm evangelical.
Yeah, not American.
Just to clarify, not one of them.
We still love them, but
they love that. Jesus loves them.
But the thing about Mary is interesting because I think evangelicals Protestants as a whole underplay Mary as a sort of, because if you read the gospel, if you read Luke's gospel, it's like, blessed is this woman, like, and even if you look at the creeds and things like that, like Theotokos, like mother of God, and that's all within the realms of orthodoxy. And yet I think a lot of Protestants, speaking generally, would be very uncomfortable talking about Mary as the mother of God, and emphasizing the fact that actually she is blessed. We're told that she's going to be blessed among humans, you know, in Luke's gospel. So we just on that thing, I think Roman Catholics, you know, in terms of, I imagine what you're getting, Andy, take it too far. You know, you're uncomfortable with the level of devotion, but also on the other side of things, I think Protestants don't go far enough.
Yeah,
we underplay the influence, the value of Mary, and how we should sort of consider her in Christian tradition, and it's somewhere in the middle, really, is where it should be.
Yeah. I think there's something about ritual as well. It's not quite the same. It's a different argument, but I like the nuance. When I did the stream to you guys, we talked a lot about nuance, didn't we? And I think there's something about like I got a recent appreciation for the Catholic rituals, even the way that they pray, and sort of the iconography as long as it's used as a way into prayer, a doorway into prayer, rosary beads or whatever, a way to focus on the Lord, and it's not used superstitiously. You want that sort of golden mean that Aristotle talked about, that amazing halfway house. Generosity, of course, is the halfway between profligacy and miserliness. And I think with all of these theologies, you want to find some kind of nuanced middle ground. So, I'm convinced by what you said about Mary. I am now a Catholic.
It's gone badly wrong.
Look what you've done.
Blame Dan.
The thing about Roman Catholic is I'm like you. I think it's like an age thing as well. Like I went to a Jesuit university, and like I love all the tradition and the pomp and stuff, and I like, there's part, like, and I love the ritual. I think as evangelicals, like as kind of inheritors of the Reformation sort of theology and things like that. The Reformation did a lot of harm, removing the images and the crosses and the art and everything that was, there is something about those things that draw your heart and your eyes up to God, to look up to this sense of awe that you don't get when you're in an evangelical church that's basically just your kitchen without utensils and some chairs. There's nothing that invigorates the soul, that draws, that gives you that sense of awe, which you get, I think, in a sort of high church, Anglican or Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, whatever it is. And there's something about I do find hard. Like I miss that bit, like feeling like I'm part of something that reaches back 2,000 years, because I think evangelical, we do church in a way that we talk about, we're all the same, we're no different to everyone else, but we think of ourselves as a little bit better about doing it in the right, in a more authentic way, and I actually think at the expense of things like liturgy. I was chatting to a friend this week about how I love again, look, I'm part New Frontiers, like charismatic with a seatbelt type, but there is something powerful about liturgy, about how December, reading through the Gospels, looking at the Nativity, and that feeling in a sort of rhythm, a spiritual sort of rhythm that then suddenly disappears. And I love December for that reason. Whereas for the rest of the year, I don't have it, because in my church stream, it's not something that we do. Easter maybe get a little bit like it, but I can see the value in the rhythm of actually your whole year being ordered by around the gospel in some way.
I think that's a huge part of it, and I think having talked to a few Catholics of that, the rhythm, the tradition, even when it comes down to apologetics, or not necessarily apologetics, but internal doctrine, you can just kind of go, well, this is what the church is teaching, and you just, which in some ways can be a bit lazy, but actually sometimes can stop you going down rabbit holes of getting yourself tied up in knots over certain doctrinal issues. So there's quite a nice safety net in that of going, actually, I don't get this bit. I don't get why there's so much of debate. I'm just going to sit where the church sits, and maybe God will make it more clear later. But there is a point where I think in evangelicalism, like, you can end up with this point of, well, at least you see it online particularly, I've read the Bible, I can independently decide what doctrine I'm going to hold, therefore there is no Trinity, or there is no something, or the 2,000 years of Christian history is totally wrong, the church is wrong on this, and you end up with a very fragmented looking idea of Christianity, and a lot of things that have been dealt with by the church, like all those heresies, all of them have generally been dealt with through history, except for the one that I won't talk about. But yeah.
Can I ask people, so, has anyone read any like books by like a Catholic apologist, like someone like Trent Horn or
Ed Pfizer? That was more. Ed Pfizer was more about natural theology. He wasn't pushing forward the Catholic sort of side of it. He wasn't talking about the Pope. Things I'll just the things I have the main issue with Catholicism would be like papal infallibility, intercession of the saints, and works. It feels a bit works based sometimes instead of just justification by faith alone. It seems sometimes you're working your way back, and then you would take the sacrament on Sunday, so you earn your grace back, kind of, and it feels like you're having to earn stuff, and it seems quite unbiblical. I know in the book of James, it kind of says there's controversy there, and the Catholics will point to that about the works, but overall it goes against sort of Paul's teachings and the teachings of the New Testament.
I think that's probably the biggest issue for me would be the papal infallibility thing, and Now, I'm not an expert in Catholicism or anything like that. I haven't read loads about it, but there are certain issues like the papal infallibility and the idea that, well, this is the church for 2,000 years. The Catholic Church has existed for 2,000 years. Well, it quite clearly hasn't. The idea of like an unbroken succession of popes going right back to Peter, the history doesn't bear that up. The idea of papal infallibility, which wasn't even defined until 1870. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head now. There's sort of been papal communications that have contradicted previous papal communications, which calls into question the whole papal infallibility thing. The idea that you're not allowed to disagree with the Pope is to instantly sort of, it doesn't send you straight to hell, but what do they say? Anathema. It anathematizes you. And then, like you said as well about the work side of it, they point to that one passage in James, but then you kind of point to the book of Romans and go, look at that. Read chapters 3 to 8 of Romans and then tell me that I have to earn my salvation. Tell me that I can't be forgiven until a priest has forgiven me. And then their interpretation of Matthew 16, and I'm just splurging at you now because
it's good. A lot of Roman, so if you speak to Roman Catholics, though, sort of they'll point to the. I think what evangelicals do as a group, I'm speaking as not as individually, but as a group, we're really badly informed about Roman Catholicism, and even more so Eastern Orthodoxy. I don't think anyone knows what that's about, and it's very easy. Like we kind of embrace these things we've heard, but we've never actually spoken to because we do the same, right? It's like imagine a Roman Catholic said, "Look, Protestant or evangelicalism, it's a load of nonsense. I've got this neighbor, he goes to church, I asked him questions, didn't know nothing." And then we'd say, "Oh yeah, but you have to, if you listen to William Lane Craig, or if you done this is what you need to do." And then we do the same thing. So we're like, "Oh no, Roman Catholicism, I've got this neighbor and he goes to Catholic church, Catholic school, and I went to a Catholic school and it was nonsense." And then So we do the same thing. We use our sort of anecdotal experience rather than going to someone like a Trent Horn or a Scott Hahn or something like that. You know, someone who actually presents the strongest case for Roman Catholicism, and which I think we should do. I think it's hypocritical of us to expect other people not to do the same for Islam. You know, who got a Muslim friend we can point to rather than going to the strongest presentation. So I think as Christians, we do have a responsibility to try and you know, if we're rather than just repeat, I'm not saying we are, I'm saying, but as a group, there is a burden on us to expect of others what we expect of ourselves.
Do you guys ever watch Matt Fradd's channel?
A little on and off.
It's good. He's a Catholic apologist on YouTube. He's quite like Cameron Bertuzzi, but like for
they've done a few shows together, haven't they? They've done a few together.
And it's really, the ones together is like Cameron trying to understand from a Protestant evangelical side, the Catholic side, and he's explaining it. And Cameron at the end of the first one was like, yeah, I can agree with that. Like what Andy said, rosary beads. We can agree with that. It's not something evil. They're just focusing while you're praying. And
and
so
it's all about who you hear from as well, isn't it? So, you know, there's plenty of famous evangelical charismatic preachers who I agree with and actually wouldn't want to recommend at all for someone to watch. You know, so like a Catholic would say, you know, if a Catholic said to me, "Oh no, you should listen to Richard Rohr," well, I've listened to Richard Rohr, and it seems to be an argument for Strictly Come Dancing rather than anything particularly theological. I'll tell you what is interesting. Having done comedy for churches for the last 16 years, I've never once been asked to do an outreach gig for a Catholic church. The only Catholic gig I've ever done in 16 years was for a Catholic youth conference, and it was the charismatic fringe of Catholicism. So I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just think it's interesting. That in the UK, certainly, there doesn't seem to be that missional edge to Catholicism. And again, you'd say, well, actually, I don't see that in lots of churches either, you know, Protestant churches either. So we're not trying to draw battle lines here, but I'm just trying to observe some of the things from my own experience. And now I'm going back to an argument from experience, which I unpacked in the first 5 minutes. Zoom out. That's it.
Have you done any JW gigs?
What's that?
Have you done any JW gigs?
Well, I turned up and I knocked on the door and they didn't answer, so it was I didn't know what to do about that.
They wouldn't have been happy about you turning up in Christmas gear. I can tell you that.
No. Anyone want to take the programmers? I wasn't sure who that was to.
Pope is not seen as the ultimate leader. Well, in Catholicism, the Pope is the ultimate leader. I mean, lower down Catholics, as lower rank Catholics, have criticised the Pope, but the Catholic stance is that the Pope is the final authority and the final say in absolutely everything and anything. So, I think he is the ultimate leader. It's not like we get a church leader over here and people can feel free to disagree with them. You're automatically anathematized in the Catholic Church if you disagree with the Pope or with the is it the College of Cardinals?
Something like that.
The thing is, though, a thing like this is, again, it's so important to know sort of Christian history, is that if you read like letters from early church fathers, it reads like this. You know, if you talk about Ignatius, you read letters, you know, some of the letters of Ignatius. It is they speak about, you know, if you criticize the bishop, it's like you're criticizing God. Like you don't. So this is early on as well. So this is something people like, if we're saying we're evangelical, we have to how do we deal with stuff like that? Because it's you know, because if you go back to the earliest church tradition we have, this is that kind of theme that's developing from then. It's not something that developed later. This respect and seeing your bishop or your spiritual authorities as representing God there was a real emphasis on that. We have to do everything. You know, we have to deal with that. How do we? You know. So then, I don't know. It's kind of always there within church tradition. It's not something that
I think it's something that I'm on the back foot on as a Protestant growing up in a very evangelical community. Growing up, I feel like I've lost some identity or understanding of early church tradition, and it's something that definitely Catholics and Eastern Orthodox would know their story far more than most Protestants. And I wouldn't have had any idea, even until uni, really, of anyone with a name like Tertullian or anything like that, with Eusebius and Augustine. Like, it was only probably relatively recently that I found out that Augustine was from Northern Africa. So it's something I think that Protestants don't do well at all, is understanding that we're from this vast tradition of theology, grappling with who Jesus is. And for me, that's been quite a significant thing in the last few years, is finding my identity as a Christian in the line of Christians. And this, we talk about Hebrews in the great cloud of witnesses. I've kind of only found that I understand a small part of the great cloud rather than the thousands of years of them. So it doesn't really answer the question of why I'm not Eastern Orthodox or Catholic. I found that I have, as I've explored biblical doctrine, that there are certain doctrines that I agree with that are probably more Orthodox and Catholic, but then there's also things that other people have said as well, like I struggle with the idea of papal infallibility and various things like that, and the veneration of the saints. So, but are Catholics fellow Christ followers? Sure. I imagine a large portion of them are, just as a large portion of Protestants are. So kind of, that's kind of where we're at. Any other thoughts on that question?
No. I'll just say, in terms of like you touched on there, Phil. I'd say like the Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, they're all our brothers in Christ. It's not like Jehovah Witness or a Mormon, which you can tell is a separate sort of sect or cult, if you want to say it like that. It's the whole Protestant Catholic history was quite strong, and I know in Ireland, where my family are from, Belfast, where there was a big Catholic Protestant problems, as we all know. So it sometimes Catholics got a bad rep and all that, but I think we just got to come recognise that we're all together in Christ, and their doctrine is sound and a lot of things, and the deity of Christ and things like that. So I think that's important.
They in like the Nicene Creed, so we're kind of good with that. I've got another question here that's a little bit more towards, I suppose, apologetics line of thinking, that probably moves away from the sort of Eastern Orthodoxy aspect and Catholicism. But the question is probably a bit more personal experience. So where do you find faith in this devastating world? I'll get it on the banner there. Nice and light for this evening. Where do you find faith in this devastating world?
That's much more of a personal thing, though, isn't it? Rather than, I think that is more a personal thing than an apologetic thing, really, because each one of us, no matter our story, we've reached a point in our lives where, whether it was a dramatic encounter or just a kind of light going on, or something has happened in our lives whereby, you know, by the power of the Holy Spirit, by the movement of God, we've come to know that it's true. I mean, I'm really jealous of people who have this massive kind of, you know, conversion experience, choirs of angels and all this kind of thing. I remember the point of my salvation. I was just sitting in church, and it was almost like somebody had whispered in my ear, you know, this is true, right? Not like I didn't hear a voice, but I mean, it was just this kind of moment where a light went on, and it was almost a subdued, and I've got to be honest, kind of an anticlimax. It's like, it's true. It's actually true. And I think from that point on, when that happens, you see things in the world that sort of bring you to your knees, and you see things that are heartbreaking, you see things that are dreadful, and you see tragedy, but you also see sort of beauty and hope, and you encounter Christ, and you find these things happening in your life, and you, as Dan and Andy were saying, your life is transformed, and you have this personal experience. And from that point on, it's not a case of sort of struggling and grappling to hold on to find faith, like it's a set of car keys that have gone down the back of the sofa. it's just something that's part of you, you know. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, and you know, and faith is a gift, as it says in Ephesians 2. And I don't know. I've kind of lost my thread. I'm rambling now, but I think the faith thing. We see the horrors and we see the bad things, and we see bad things in the Bible as well. But if you're going to take a bit of the Bible, then you've got to take all of the Bible. And if you're going to take a bit of life, then you've got to take all of life. And you see the bad things, but then you see transformed lives, and you see hope, and you see light going on in people's lives, and you see, you know, people finding Christ, and their lives are transformed. And then you look at people like that and you think, yeah, Jesus, you know, the old cliche, Jesus never promised us an easier life, and Jesus never said this world was going to be great. But he did say, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And he has promised us that we'll be with him in eternity. So yeah, I think it's just a case of understanding that the world isn't going to be great, and the world isn't going to be all, you know, sunshine and rainbows. But there's an eternal hope. There's an eternal hope in Christ. I think that's where our faith comes from.
I think that's right. And I think I really liked what you said, and also that you look a bit like my stunt double. So thank you for that.
That's what I was going for.
I think the most compelling thing about Christianity is that it hits suffering head on, doesn't ignore it, doesn't call it illusion, doesn't blame us individually for the fact that we suffer. Hits it head on, meets us in it, and offers us a way out of it. And I do think it obviously depends what we mean by faith, because what someone says when they say, where do you find faith? They might not mean what we think of as faith. So for us as Christians, faith is the substance of the things that we hope for. Hope, on a Christian view, has a substance, and it's called faith. But then you might say, well, what do we mean by hope? Hope isn't just expecting that thing you want to happen, or waiting for that thing that you want to happen. 2020 has shown that most of the things we hoped would happen, expected to happen, were wishing for, have not happened. And in lots of cases, the opposite of those things has happened. So, where do we get our faith? We keep our faith from the fact that Christianity offers a placeholder, and also then an entry route from the problem of suffering in a way that just nothing else comes close to doing. And it's the anchor for our soul, isn't it? I mean, a lot of Hebrew is being quoted today, but it's the anchor for our soul. When you've got nothing else, you're still anchored in that relationship with Jesus. So yeah, as my lookalike said, we could reform Right Said Fred, the band. Do you remember?
We absolutely should.
We should do that. Richard here can go on drums. This is Richard, by the way. He keeps telling me his blood is black. I think he was been in the store cupboard for a year, and like he came out, he's like, "Oh, my blood is black." I don't know what he means by that. Anyway, that's not really to do with apologetics. Someone else have a go now.
Just leave it at that.
Who's going to follow that one?
Yeah, I probably end up being a bit heavy. I guess the biggest question with the assumption of a devastating world, that kind of often the reply is, well, what makes it devastating, and why do we expect any different? So I still, so for me, and this is definitely a personal experience response. Maybe there's a slight apologetic edge to it, but I'm happy for pushback. But I can't, when I try and put myself in, specifically in an atheistic worldview, to look at suffering seems just like bad luck. There's not really a good or bad about it. It just is. And I know that's a Dawkinsism from his God delusion, but that seems to be an honest view of things. Like if you cut out objective meaning, then anything that's suffering, well, you just kind of have to get on with it. And so when someone asks, why is there suffering and why does it matter, it assumes that there should be something better, something different. And that, I think, isn't answered on the atheistic worldview. I'm not saying that people don't find their own personal answer to that or their own personal meaning, but I don't find that a satisfactory answer. And I think other faiths might have their own understanding of suffering and what the answer is to suffering. But I think Christianity gives us the best hope and a grounding that's can be dug into historically as well, which helps. So if someone really did defeat death, well, that's something worth figuring out what that means for us, the one big pointer of suffering. So I'm happy for any pushback on that, because I keep asking this question, like, why does suffering matter? And at least over text, in text format, I haven't had have any of you had a decent engagement with that?
Well,
yeah.
I think when we're talking about, I'm sorry if I'm hogging it. But
you go for it. We got the time. You're easy to look at.
To be here.
We like the reindeer.
Yeah. When people are asking about suffering, they're not asking about rationale. They don't want reason in inverted commas. They're asking an emotional question, and what we have is the fact that actually Christianity. And this is why I remain a Christian. I actually think the intellectual arguments for Christianity are slightly stronger than their opponents. But where I think Christianity is the only one to come to the table is in the emotional sense that it makes. Christianity, and it's what Francis Buford talked about in his book, is that Christianity makes the most emotional sense. It answers the deepest longings of the heart. And you just don't find that anywhere else. And again, I'm all about this hidden in plain sight idea. When someone says to me, "Oh yeah, well I can find joy and love and hope in things that aren't religion," I say, "Yeah, but you agree then that you're wired for joy and hope and purpose and things and love, unconditional love." Everybody desires that state of being where all shall be well. Everybody desires that state of being, and Jesus is the only one who offers it. So
it's like the argument from desire, isn't it? The argument from longing. Like C.S. Lewis made it big, but it's the overwhelming feeling within everybody that there's something that isn't quite. There's something that's missing in this world. There's something we're meant for something other than this. And there's, I hate that kind of cheesy Americanism, but it turns out that it's annoyingly accurate. There's a God-shaped hole in everyone's heart. It's like there's something that we long for that nothing in this world can fulfill. And you get so many rich people and successful people and famous people and people who've sort of gotten to the peak of whatever field they're in, and they get there and they find that it isn't what they thought it was going to be. And then you find Christ and you think, well, even when I'm having a rotten day, I love the like the book of Psalms, like you were saying earlier, Andy, the Bible meets suffering head on. It doesn't try and brush it under the rug. Huge chunks of the book of Psalms are about, I'm so miserable, I'm so lost, I'm in agony, I'm afraid, they're after me, I don't know where my hope is coming from. But it's always turns back to, but you're there, Lord. You're there, Lord, and I know that you are there. So, and I know that eventually I'll see you. So, yeah, life is rubbish sometimes. Just to keep it really light, as you said. But
I'm gonna have to put another hat on if you're not careful, Craig.
The hat is out.
That's working. Just to say on the chat, I think the program has found the pigeonhole, because we've just had like stacks of questions come including ones like that. I think this is the program. It sounds like. So I just said, whoever wrote this as a question, we'd be up for a meetup, and sounds like a good idea. Wrote that. So we agree. But there's also some other questions have come in that are if you want to vote them up so that we just talk about some interesting things. We haven't even answered, is Dean a heretic yet? So we can tick that one off.
Saving that till the end. Once you see me dance.
Oh, we haven't even seen the dance yet. Come on, let's see
that's
that.
At the end. When Dan gets out the wine, I'll do a dance.
I'm going to be getting my Shiraz in a minute, I think. So,
Especially there's dancing.
There is something about, like, going back to the question. There is something about Christianity that why it's so successful around like in the non-Western world, so South America, Africa, Asia, etc. Is there's something that it offers people. I think when you're in poverty and you've known suffering, and just to say, there is a bit of a. Is there a?
I'm not hearing an echo. But
oh, right, I've got a massive echo.
We can mute ourselves for a moment.
So there is something about what Christianity is perceived of. I mean, when your life sucks, and I've been there. You know, you've known, you know, suffering and things like that. And on a cosmic level, there's nothing about naturalism or atheism or that offers any sort of satisfying response. It's like, you know, why is atheism not on the up in areas of the world where there is, you know, massive poverty and suffering and things? Well, it's because telling people who are unsatisfied, unhappy, poor, suffering, don't have access to, you know, good healthcare and things like that, that actually on a cosmic scale you don't matter to anyone, and the only people that are ever going to remember you are those that you know, your loved ones, if you're lucky enough to have any, and other than that, it's just sort of, you know, I guess it kind of sucks, but no one will remember you. And there's nothing particularly uplifting about that. Now, as I said before, like, actually that doesn't matter in terms of truth. That could be absolutely true. You know, you couldn't matter on a cosmic level, and you know, no one's going to remember you 5 minutes after your death. That doesn't mean it's not true. But there is also something that's incredibly powerful about the gospel message. Actually, you do matter on a cosmic level. Look, the universe is immense, you know, to the point you can't even fathom, and yet you matter. And yet the God who created it all actually knows you, added to himself flesh, entered the world, and you know, is willing to engage with you, to forgive you, to know you, and there is something, you know, for people who have nothing, or, you know, not just have nothing. I don't always mean that you have nothing, but, you know, in the midst of suffering and tragedy, actually there is something immensely existentially powerful with that, and draws people in. And that's something that was so powerful to me. Is like, you know, I thought on a cosmic scale, I didn't matter. And actually, I think that's why the gospel made so much. It was so powerful, because it was, you know, it's actually saying, no, the incarnation is true, but this happened in history. You know, compared to any other religion, you know, that's what's so unique about Christianity, is it happened in history. You know, and that Christ rose from the dead, and that it matters that Christianity is a historical religion compared to others. And so it's not just wishful thinking, like, oh, I want to matter to God. You know, I want there to be a creator. I want to have cosmic significance. But actually, it's rooted in historical, in human history. And I think that's so powerful.
Humanism is really good at churning out bumper stickers for the backs of cars. So, for instance, you know, you go up to a 5-year-old child dying of cancer and say, oh, well, mate, you know, we're here for a good time, not a long time. And they say, well, I haven't had either of those. YOLO! I mean, these are bumper stickers. And you get down to it, and actually most sort of street humanists or street atheists will have to default to something like that. And that's not an explanation of reality. That is a fobbing off. That is an explaining away of reality. And, you know, so you've got these bumper stickers, and then you've got the word of God that is living and active. And actually, ticks those boxes. But equally, when someone says, "Oh, it's just wishful thinking," well, no, because if it was just wishful thinking, then the Bible wouldn't be so strong on telling us not to engage in wishful thinking, but actually to have something that goes beyond that, which is actually properly rooted. So, yeah, I think actually the fact that the Bible says, well, no, you, on the one hand, emotionally, this makes a lot of sense, but also it's really going to cost you. As C.S. Lewis said, it wouldn't be, and we wouldn't be 5 evangelicals if we weren't all quoting C.S. Lewis every 37 seconds. But, he says, if you don't want to deal in facts, well, you can make anything up. The fact is, when you're dealing with facts, it's going to be hard and it's going to be complicated.
Yeah, that's good.
You don't become a Christian for like the easy ride, basically, do you? You lose friends, you lose I've lost, or not lost friends, but you don't have the same like drinking pattern as Craig mentioned. I had that. I was a heavy drinker as well. You don't have, your lifestyle changes, and it is in many ways a lot harder. It's easy to live without worrying about consequences or with your desires and things like that. So it's a stricter life in certain senses, but it's well worth it, and it's. Yeah, I completely agree with what Andy was just saying.
Yeah,
I should hope so.
And
just to keep it light. So Dan's off to get his wine. So we'll just remove him from the stream. Here's the next one.
Near-death experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched quite a few things on YouTube about it, like documentaries, and it's really intriguing. Gary Habermas, I don't know if you guys are aware of him. He talks about near-death experiences, and he's like got it from peer-reviewed scientific journals, and he only goes by that standard. And he also doesn't even look at the like millions who have say they've gone to heaven or hell or different religious experiences. Is no, what can we actually factual prove? Like above the bed, the operating table, there's a 12-digit scan number on this piece of machinery that this woman said she drifted above, saw her body, saw the number, remembered it, and told the nurse. The nurse the next day got the ladder, like when the maintenance man was in the room. He went up there, exactly the same number. You can't explain that through, well, anything really. They're the cases he looks at, and I've got really interested in it about 6 months ago, and through Habermas and things like that. And I haven't read any good books on it yet, but it sounds really unexplainable in certain situations like that. There's other ones where they go across the hospital route, 2 rooms down, and then they'll say, I heard you talking about your husband or something in this room. They come back round, they speak to the person, say, I heard this. How could they have known that? It's literally impossible, especially if there's no soul. We're just literally chemistry in our brains. And we die on death. Yeah. These people are dead, they're gone, and they're knowing these other things. It's just, I'm definitely impressed with what I've heard about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Go on, Andy.
Go on.
Oh, it's just kind of it's kind of agreeing. Like, you've probably got something more to say than I have. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with them. That there's this sort of, all they prove in my mind is there's something more to us than just chemicals and a naturalistic explanation would really struggle with that kind of evidence that he pulls together. And I think where it goes into things like heaven and hell tourism, that's where I would struggle. And I think actually generally what I've found, those whether the books of kids who've seen heaven or those horrific YouTube clips that you can find of those who visited hell, generally anyone defending their particular view of the afterlife through an NDE will ignore all the other NDEs that disagree with their understanding of the afterlife. And I've just heard so many really terrible arguments as to why that might be, that their one version of this afterlife must be true because of this one or two NDEs that have written books, and they wouldn't lie, obviously, because they're not making money. Well, they kind of are. But this one from a Hindu who had an afterlife experience, they must be wrong. They're just lying or something. And so that's the kind of argumentation around NDEs that I'm just like, nah. But if there's an interesting story like you were saying, Dean, where you just can't explain what they've heard, what they've seen when they should have been dead.
Because Habermas is exactly the same as you feel. Like he said, he dismisses all the heaven, hell, different religious views. He just sticks to the cases which you can, like, scientifically look at, the equipment above the room, or there was this shoe on the roof of the hospital. How would she have known that in that case? So that side of it, what he was sticking to. Danny, Phil's trying to bring up hell again, by the way. So as he walks off, he's
only went away for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, all right. I'll just change my name to the Hell Guy. Yeah,
I've got the world's smallest bottle of wine.
No, I'm drinking out the bottle though. Classy.
I couldn't find the glass.
Any other comments on NDEs? I think that's pretty much. I don't have any more to say. Does anyone else have any more to say on near-death experiences?
Just to agree with what's been said. So Habermas would say that he said 20% of NDEs are hellish. So statistically, 20% of them are hellish in some way. But yeah, as you both just said, it's a really good argument against materialistic naturalism, and then once you get someone to accept that there are NDE experiences, well, then you can simply ask that question again: what makes the most sense of that? What case can we draw? And I think apologetics, I'm becoming increasingly anti-American, not anti any particular American theology, but just quite anti-American. In it, that's too strong. But I quite like the British approach. The good old British approach is to just have a cup of tea and to put forward, arguments that make more sense than their opponents. Whereas I think I've been thinking about it today when I was in the bath, and because I wanted to have a rehearsal for my baptism, and I was thinking, actually, American apologetics, it's run like the Marine Corps. It's like, we've got to have all of these arguments, and they've got to be knocked down arguments, and we will not be beaten. We will be the first argument on the battlefield and the last argument out of it. I'm really impressed by all of that, but also I don't think we need to go there. I thought we could just chill out a little bit, and, have a cup of tea, and and just look at things in a more English way. Have a scone and some jam.
A scone.
And
That's
offer
controversial.
a cumulative case. So I do think, and I know William Lane Craig would talk about this really well. Christianity offers a really good cumulative case. Okay, so the universe is likely to have had a beginning. The universe is rigged in our favor in terms of fine-tuning. Morality exists. We've got good evidence that Jesus did lots of cool things and appeared to his disciples. You've got this wiring that is made best sense of by Christianity. I think as a domino effect, that's the best way to look at it. You look at any argument in its own right. You kind of remove it from the herd, and it's going to get taken out. And I think this is what I wanted to say. Not that anyone's asking this, but someone asked me this.
You want me to nip on Pigeonhole and ask it, and then you can answer it?
No, I don't need. I always answer the question that I've chosen to answer, even if it's not.
Future in politics.
I inadvertently gave some really good advice that I realised was good advice as I was giving it, even though I hadn't planned to give it. Somebody said to me, "What's the best advice you would give to somebody sharing the gospel?" And I would say, don't take on. It's like a fight. Don't take on a group that are against you. If you're going to defend your faith, don't do it when you're the only Christian in the room, particularly for a new person, because actually you are going to get shouted out. You're going to get surrounded and spoken over. It doesn't matter if no one else knows what they're talking about. They will all feel safety in numbers, and they will all convince themselves that you are the moron, and you will just feel really, really, really deflated. So I think one-to-one chats are the way forward. And I know that's not what we were talking about, but I'm going to be 40 soon, and so I'm probably suffering from early onset dementia.
Just to say about the
go on.
are we still talking about near-death experiences?
Yeah, I think so. Andy brought in another.
I'm about to have one.
Yeah. Because there are some interesting, like, naturalistic explanations of near-death experiences. So, we do have, there's an endogenous, so like we have it within our body, a hallucinogen, DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And, there has been some interesting research looking at how actually when someone is clinically dead, but still being resuscitated, that the DMT can have, because it is a hallucinogen, can have, similar, people who have been awake have had similar kinds of experiences using DMT as a hallucinogen, an exogenous hallucinogen, have these kinds of out of body experiences. So it is within the realms of possibility that there are naturalistic explanations to near-death experiences without embracing a non-naturalist explanation for it, which I think I'm kind of it's not like I'm ruling out near-death experiences, but I actually think if I was a naturalist, I wouldn't feel too challenged, I think, by a theistic explanation to near-death experiences, because I think actually there are some good naturalistic reasons to kind of explain them.
Interesting. I'll have to look into that a bit more. Here's another question. Have you guys experienced a miracle?
I was saved.
Boom.
Where's your mic?
I was the church that I used to be in. I left there some years ago, but the first church that I was a part of, the church where I was saved, there was a guy that was in a wheelchair, and he'd been coming to the church for quite a long time. He hadn't just turned up one night. He'd been coming to the church quite a long time. He'd become almost completely paralyzed from the waist down in a car crash years earlier. He had a very, very limited use of his legs, like very limited. After the service one day, the pastors prayed for him, and he stood up and he picked up his wheelchair and he started running around the church with it over his head. And he's still walking now. He occasionally does have to sort of retire to his wheelchair because he gets tired and he gets achy and things like that. It looked pretty convincing to me. I mean, like I said, he'd been there for months in a wheelchair, and his wife looked about as surprised as anybody else when it happened. On a slightly less dramatic tone, just a personal one. Years ago, my wife, we were on our way back from London on the coach, and she had like a really bad stomach, and it was getting worse through the day, and she had her head on my shoulder, and she was trying to sleep, and she was in a lot of pain. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to pray for her. It's not going to hurt. Apparently it can work sometimes. And I didn't tell her I was just going to pray. I just laid my head back. And after 30 seconds or so, she jolted and she looked at me and were you praying for me? Yeah. She said, it's just like this warmth went through my body and it just stopped hurting. Just like that. And she said, I knew you were praying for me. So.
Amazing.
Seems like a sort of very limited miracle.
It's hard. We have to define, like, what do we mean by a miracle? That's probably
that's one of those hard questions we're going to send to Andy.
Yeah. Because generally, I think most people would understand a miracle to be anything in which can't be explained by a naturalistic explanation. But that's always, that's why I think miracles are really difficult to actually demonstrate, to not to prove, but to demonstrate, because we don't. Even if you say that, there are always possible naturalistic explanations that we're not aware of. We don't know yet. sort of naturalism of the gap sort of thing. But it is difficult what actually constitutes a miracle, because I think Christians, and I'm not saying anything you said there, Craig, would not necessarily meet that standard, but I think Christians as a whole are very quick to call things miracles that aren't miracles. You know, like, oh, I prayed because I lost my car keys, and then I prayed and then I found them, and that was a miracle. And I don't mean that to dismiss, like,
no,
it might have been. But actually, that's not a miracle, and I think there is a risk of sometimes of demeaning the importance and power of a miracle by calling things miracles that aren't.
Being a bit quick to ascribe miraculous power to something that, like you said, could just have a naturalistic explanation. I mean, I would never use, even if I believed that I'd sort of seen or witnessed or experienced a miracle myself, unless it was absolutely sort of mind-blowingly no possible naturalistic explanation, I would never use one in an apologetic sense or in a sort of evangelistic attempt or a gospel sharing conversation or anything like that, because I think that in and of themselves you can't say that miracles are evidence of God. All you can say is something's happened and we don't know what has happened. I think, like with near-death experiences, I don't think that if you've got somebody who's skeptical or somebody who's an atheist or even somebody who's agnostic, near-death experiences and miracles, all they prove is there's something beyond what we understand at the moment. So yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we have to be really careful with using words like miracle.
But I think what they do, and to use your story as an example, Craig, stories of miracles, stories of signs and wonders, they are intriguing. So they're definitely intriguing for people who've got, ears to hear. And so you can build on that. So I think narratively they are compelling. And I think, it's been on Twitter today actually as one thing the Protestant church has been bad at is redeeming the arts. And actually we've lost, I think, my weird opinion at the moment, I've been thinking of during lockdown, is that Protestant preaching needs a modernist revival. In the same way that post First World War, modernism as we know it in literature happened, and Ezra Pound, like sort of the motto of modernism, Ezra Pound said, make it new. So take what's been done before and make it new. I think my personal belief, an opinion I respect, and I think we all should, is that preaching needs a modernist revival. And that's partly about recapturing narrative and storytelling. And I know some people would say, oh yeah, well, there's people that do that. I'm not terribly convinced that there's lots of people doing what that's claimed, but probably in pockets. But yeah, so I think signs and wonders, miracles, narratively, emotionally, again, quite compelling and intriguing. You can use that as a hook for people. Yeah, but if you've got staunch materialists or rationalists, they're not even buying a ticket for that, let alone watching the show.
No, not a chance.
Have any of you read Craig Keener's 2-volume set on miracles or engaged with it at all?
Yes.
You have? It's massive. I've read some of it, but not both volumes.
What do you think? They're asking your thoughts.
You've read it, so you do it, Andy.
I would recommend it to a friend. I think it was really good. I like it. I like, in the same way that there was that book, I can't remember who, Surprised by the Power of the Holy Spirit, that was written a couple of decades ago now. I like it when academics, and Habermas does this as well. Habermas is my hero. I wish he was my dad. Is he watching, Gary?
Oh, so
he's one of the 5 people. He's one of the 5 here. Gary, William Lane Craig,
yeah, John Lennox,
Michael O'Connor, and Alistair McGrath.
And
just
my friend Pip.
Just for you.
You're in good company, Pip. So yeah, no, I like it. I can't. It was last year I read it, but I like it when academics look at the arguments for the the charismatic and have at least substantive evidence. I like that. I like seeing a collation of statistics in favor of charismatic gifts of the Spirit, because although I don't go to a New Frontiers church again, I am that sort of New Frontiers British charismatic with the seatbelt on. Let's not go overboard, guys. God's just turned up. Can we all just calm down, please? Because we need to be out of the venue by 4. That sort of thing.
Yeah, not too much Holy Spirit. On that note, we the next question, unless there's another miracle.
Well, I was just going to say that he like Andy said, that the Keener book is awesome. Like it really does go into a lot of detail and provides a lot of support for the miracle claims, which is similar. Which is the same for
Is it modern?
Say again?
Is it modern miracles? Yeah. Sorry, is it modern miracles?
Yeah. It goes. It's like really well documented. It's a really awesome book.
It looks at how one of the things they look at how Last of the Summer Wine kept getting recommissioned, and that's like he opens with that.
modern miracles. Anyway, so it's Andy's birthday soon. So Ronald D. Potts, thanks for commenting. We're trying out Periscope for the first time, so we got some Twitter interaction. If you want academic and charismatic look into the charismatic theology of St. Luke and Acts, is anyone engaged with that? I haven't.
No, I've spoke to Ron on Twitter, and he's mentioned that book before.
Got one for the reading
sounds good.
Yeah. Well, on that note, here's another question then. I think we're probably all on the same page given our last few questions. So this might be quite a short answer on here. Dean, you're on the screen. What are your thoughts?
You're up.
On continuationism. I don't even know what that means that much, to be honest.
So
I'm probably the worst person to ask on this.
Do you believe that the age of miracles has ended? Cessationism,
No.
Cessationism is just the belief that like the gifts of the Holy Spirit were just for the early church. There's no speaking in tongues, there's no healings, anything like that. No,
I definitely believe and miracles are still going on, but like Dan and everyone here basically so far, I'm quite like British, quite skeptical of miracles unless I haven't personally experienced a miracle. I've had religious experiences, but I would be continuation. I do believe in miracles, but not like popping up all over the place, like kind of thing. But definitely still can happen. I'm sure.
I think we're pretty much all on the same page. I mean, I do struggle with cessationism, with where they've drawn the line. It seems quite arbitrary on when things ceased, and that then renders quite a lot of Paul's letters weird. They're weird things to suggest that we should seek things like prophecy. And
what type of Christian denominations or groups would believe in that stopping like that?
In my experience, it's some forms of Baptists,
Reformed Baptists,
Reformed Presbyterians.
Okay.
Yes, there's a bit of a mix, and maybe potentially it's a response to the fact that we don't seem to see that many miracles or movements of the Spirit. It means that anytime there's a bunch of healings and revivals, and they're generally overly cynical and very much start calling it cult-like and things like that. At least that's my experience.
They do tend to give them fuel for that, though.
Yeah, that's true.
There's definitely fuel for it. It's always unfortunate. When you look at any of them, there's always some things that give you a bit of caution. But often lots of good stuff and stuff that we're still benefactors of.
I think again it goes back to what Dan was asking about what is a miracle. So every time I go out on the street praying for people, I will see we will see stuff happen. We will see people that experience healing. We will see people experience heat and a tingling. Often people will say, "I've never experienced anything like this before." The fact that I'm part of a reasonably large but quite obscure church in Derbyshire means that we don't give it loads of traction. We don't make a big song and dance about it. So it doesn't become syndicated or sensationalized or tabloidy. I think the balance here that I'd want to strike is that middle ground where actually the reason most people don't see stuff is because they don't go after it. Actually, God is good and wants to partner with you and wants to show up in situations. So the point of healing is to point to Jesus, is to point to the gospel. In the same way that the point of a preach is to point to Jesus. The point of a food bank, a Christian food bank, is to point to Jesus. There's all these signposts, and healing and stuff is one of them. So actually, 100% of the people I don't pray for don't get healed. That's something true, and quite a low number of people, I would say, have genuinely experienced the healing. Some of them have claimed it as a kind of placebo or psychosomatic thing. There's always something left over though, because actually God shows up. God does show up. He shows up in situations, and sometimes that's in the form of healing and signs and wonders and gifts of the Spirit, and sometimes it's not. I think when we try and idolize and elevate healing as like the savior of the church and declare that there's all these revivals. Well, you should be the revival. Your life should be the revival. If you've got a word of knowledge for somebody, share it. If you've got the faith to pray for somebody, pray. Otherwise, just make them a cake or do something. This idea of like mass revival, I think, turns into hysteria. But at ground level, there's loads of stuff. Like, you come out with me if you're a cessationist, you won't be a cessationist by the time we finish. Not because of anything that I do, but just because God shows up when you show up. If you give him the availability, he'll give you the ability.
And the thing is as well.
That's tweetable.
I think you got this. Sorry, this was just. I just have to share this. There you go. You got your online amen. We were too British, Andy, for that.
Yeah.
It's because I said something quite American, and now like, yeah, come on.
Yeah.
But it's right though. If God's working through like all of our lives constantly, I don't see how the cessationists justify like the Holy Spirit reviving us and our religious experiences, and it seems strange the way they view it. But yeah,
I think there's to defend a couple of friends who are cessationists slightly. I wonder sometimes if it's a bit of semantics. I've recently seen someone who would claim to be a cessationist say that they are making quite a significant change of career. I don't want to give too much away because there might be people who are watching. The language used was very much that he's heard from God and God has spoken, and that's the reason for his change. And I would say, well, that's a fairly big clue that things are continuing. But the language there is less about prophecy and words and things like that, and the spiritual gifts. So the Spirit works, but they probably wouldn't have a baptism of the Holy Spirit. It comes one and the same with your salvation and things like that. So there is a biblical grounding for it, but it's probably not as charismatic in that way.
right.
Dan, you look like you were prepping for an answer, or are you just getting comfy?
I was just getting comfy, mate.
Cool.
Just getting comfy.
All right, well, we're at 1 hour 30, and we haven't answered Santi's question from Finding Truth. So
Come on, Santi.
Let's do this. So, why do you believe in the Trinity if it is not mentioned in the Bible? Can you provide a defense of it? Who's up?
Well, lots of things not mentioned in the Bible.
Lots of things not mentioned in the Bible. That's true. That's a good start.
How handsome I am is not mentioned in the Bible, but
I mentioned
prima
anywhere.
facie evidence.
Go on, Craig. Give us something.
Okay. Where do you start? The Bible is extraordinarily clear that there is one and only God. There is only one God. It says it all over the Old and New Testament. And yet, at the same time, it is abundantly clear in the New Testament that the Father is God, Jesus is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. Jesus is called God and doesn't, to his face, and doesn't refute it or tell them not to call him God. He uses the divine name of himself. He forgives sins. In the book of Hebrews, we're back to Hebrews again, we have the Father using a passage from Psalm 101, I think it is, which is clearly about God, but he applies it to the Son. In Acts chapter 5, the Holy Spirit is called God. All through the book of Acts, the Holy Spirit says and does things that only God can do or would say. And it's blatantly obvious that the Father is God. Nobody would argue against that. Even Unitarians accept that one. So, yeah, there are clear and blatant evidences and references to both the Holy Spirit and the Son being God. And yet, at the same time, there is only one God. And the only logical conclusion is that the Trinity is an accurate depiction of the nature of God. In a nutshell.
Boom.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
There you go, Santi. Let us know if that answers the question succinctly enough. So go on, Dan.
Well, I was going to say, so obviously you say that you like, Craig, you speak to Jehovah's Witnesses quite a lot, which is evident from your answer there. So what JW will raise certain responses to that. What are some of the responses you get from JWs, and how would you respond?
One thing that they'll do quite regularly is they'll point to the passages where Jesus is referred to as a man, or he refers to himself as a man, or he says my God and your God when talking about the Father. But what they kind of tend to do is they'll compartmentalize the New Testament, and they'll take a verse or a passage, and then they'll sort of ignore the other bits around it. But what you kind of say to them is, well, I will take the whole New Testament and the whole Old Testament. So John 1:1, I mean, there is absolutely no point in raising John 1:1 with the Jehovah's Witness. They just they shut down on you. They've heard it so many times. But then they have trouble answering things like, well, in Colossians chapter 1, it says that Jesus created all things. And in Isaiah 44 and Jeremiah 27:5 and Nehemiah 9:6 and Isaiah 42 something, and goodness knows how many other passages, God said, I created everything by myself. And then Colossians 1 and book of Hebrews and John chapter 1, it says Jesus created everything. So either Jesus is lying, or the New Testament is lying, or God is lying, or Jesus is God.
I watched on the Santi, who raised this question. I was in the thread. He was actually arguing with a Jehovah's Witness, and then some Unitarians jumped in as well. And that Colossians part, Craig, they actually added. They said no, the word "other" is missing.
Yeah.
And then Santi copied in like his friends who actually study Hebrew and Greek and like the languages, and they said no, it's not. It's then they went, no, your Bible's wrong.
The word isn't there in Greek, and they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, because the Jehovah's Witnesses on their website, they've got like an interlinear, so they've got the whole Bible, and they've got the Hebrew and the Greek sort of, I don't know if you've ever seen an interlinear Bible. So they'll give the Hebrew and the Greek, and then they'll give the English translation underneath, and you can show them in their own interlinear Bible. You can say, look, Colossians 1, the Greek word allos for other, it's not there. It's not there in Colossians 1, and you've added it in.
They wouldn't accept that still, even
they won't take it now.
Well, it used to be in brackets. They used to have it in brackets in the older versions, whereas now they don't even have it in brackets. It's just in the latest version. It's just there.
Yeah.
Have you ever, just out of curiosity, have you ever used Revelation 1 in those conversations? Is just having studied Revelation recently, this sort of
the Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, Alpha and Omega, the language. And Richard Borkham points out how Trinitarian the language is, and you've got the Holy Spirit in Revelation 1. Obviously, it's symbolic, but it doesn't seem to come up in too many conversations when discussing Trinity. But once you start looking at how Jesus is described as the Ancient of Days, pretty much, from Daniel 9.
Daniel, yeah.
So
which is what Jesus calls himself in Mark 15 as well, isn't it? He says, well, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, at which point the Pharisees all start screaming blasphemy, and you kind of say, well, why were they screaming blasphemy if he wasn't calling himself God?
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No. That's exactly it. There's these connections that don't seem to be made, and that would be my so that I interact more with Muslims rather than JWs, but they seem to make similar arguments when it comes to the Trinity. But I guess I don't know how much JWs have this, but at least with Muslims, they have a set argument against the Trinity in their everyday prayers. So it's sort of routinely, despite the fact that it's what they pray against isn't actually the Orthodox view of Trinity. It's three of a kind rather than three persons in one being, which is then hard to unpick a little bit. That was a really succinct answer on the Trinity, and I think just a reminder that it's an explanation for what we see through the Bible, rather than going, I've got Trinity, how can I then find it? So
it's just the only explanation that makes sense if you look at all the different passages,
Yeah, it's also the Old Testament as well, because I think a common criticism, isn't it, that Trinitarianism just sort of pops out of nowhere from the New Testament. So before that, strict sort of monotheism. But there are threads throughout the Old Testament. Sodom and Gomorrah, and you've got God above and God below.
Fire on.
You've got theophanies and stuff throughout. The angel of the Lord, speaking to Abraham and Sarah. So even within the Jewish tradition, there is monotheism. There's a surface level monism, but actually you dig deeper in sort of Jewish tradition. There is some interesting sort of Jewish thought on the nature of God.
So this question just came up on the nature of God. I think that is true, that there are some parts of the Quran that seem to confuse that Mary is part of the Trinity. That is, it's a bit of an odd one. That one.
No, you're not making that up, Callum. It is they completely misunderstand what the Trinity is, and that's just utterly self-evident from the nature. They had certain Arab Christian tribes and stuff at the time that were purporting these sorts of beliefs and stuff. So that's where they got it from, not from a kind of Orthodox understanding going back to sort of Tertullian and things like that. So you're not making it up. It's in there. I don't know the surah and of
which where that is.
Surah 5. I don't know. I might be making it up.
I was watching
confidence though.
I said it was Surah 5, ayah 117. Just don't check it
This
up.
guy's it's like Rain Man of theology.
Not just Christian theology either.
Yeah. And he does a magic show where he hands out copies of the Upanishads, and he'll say, like, pick a page and I'll tell you what words on line 6.
There's stuff as well. So they quote there's stuff about Jesus creating a bird, and it flying away. It's stuff from Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, and there's all sort of Gnostic writings.
Have you read Tom Holland's book, the one on the origins of Islam? It was like Persia, fire, something.
I haven't read that yet. It's on my list.
It's not Persian fire. It's the Shadow of the Sword.
Shadow of the Sword. Sorry,
I haven't read through it, but I have a sort of loose understanding of some of the things he says.
I watched his speech on YouTube, like a conference he was doing just before that, and just basically what you said. He said that Arabs. He doesn't believe Mecca is actually where it is now, so he's got quite a controversial take. It was closer to, instead of being Saudi Arabia, was on the edges of Palestine, because a lot of the heretics, like the Gnostics, were pushed away from, and then they become tribesmen. So Muhammad would have picked up all the Gnostic sort of understandings from like basically the desert people like that. That's what Tom Holland's view on it.
There's one in there's a Mecca in Mansfield as well. It's a bingo hall. There's one there. But I don't know if that's the original.
Just to shout, if anyone's interested about the Gospel of Thomas, which Islam pulls a lot from, go to Finding Truth, subscribe, and check him out.
I'm leaving now. I'm actually going to leave and go and join that.
Tomorrow,
guys.
You'll be a bit early.
Oh, tomorrow.
You should be one of the ones waiting.
Can I just offer a sort of non-academic, sort of slightly colloquial thing? In terms of the Trinity, like it's one of the most difficult questions to answer for somebody who's new to faith or interested in Christianity, because it's an in-house question. Actually, it's not. You don't need to deal with it straight away. And actually, I think it's one of the areas where we have the least convincing defenses, because it is just an intimation of what we're finding there. But what I do think is interesting again is that it adds credence to that gospel claim that you can have a relationship with God, because God is already in relationship. So the Trinity is a relationship. It is a community, and you are then offered a part of that community. So God isn't just this distant loner, self-interested, and whatever you want to say. God is already in that dynamic relationship before humanity is even created, and we get offered into that. So again, I think that makes relational and emotional sense. But who is Andy Kind? I'll meet you by the Mecca bingo. I'll tell you who I am, mate. What do you?
Mecca's not what you think it is, though.
What do you 8-bit games from the 1980s?
And I think, are you talking about me? I don't know.
The guy above London Fish?
I run the channel.
Andy Kind.
Program, what are you on? Check out Andy Kind on the Critical Witness. You can learn all about him and his Promedian
Who is Andy Kind?
antics. He's now offended. Awesome. I'm kind of running low on questions that I think that was the top question from Santi with 4 votes. We've got a couple, just some smaller ones. How much of a role model for evangelism is Jordan Peterson, London Theist? You can talk.
Yeah, well, he helped me become a Christian, so
that's why you're here.
Yeah. I've discussed this before, I think, with you guys and on other shows, and he's helped like quite a lot of people. I've found out now as well. It was just the biblical series and everything about that. It just showed me that the Bible isn't just like myth, as I would think when I was an agnostic or something. Like, there's deep levels to it, even just on a psychological level. And he was going into like details about Cain and Abel, how it's only a few lines. Is something echoing?
Maybe we can mute again. It sometimes resets itself.
It's right. It's not
Your voice is in Trinity.
Yeah. But yeah, he just went, and it just really opened it up to me, Jordan Peterson. He was a big inspiration at the time when I needed quite a bit of searching for meaning in my life. And he really helped quite a lot of young people. And I liked his book. I mostly followed him on YouTube. And I think he's done a good job of pointing people towards meaning. And he gets you almost to Christianity without the like supernatural level. But then you're so close to that next step. And then it all just makes sense. And you start praying, and I did anyway. So he's definitely doing a great job, I think, without being a full-on Christian, like an evangelist. Yeah.
I think there's a fair point. And I guess there's a question for all of us. Is there anything that you would take from his approach? I mean, my only failing is that I'm not a clinical psychologist, but in that regard, so I'd be able to do his lectures.
Can I just say something?
Go on.
Right, I did guess, but look at this, right? Surah 5:116.
You've been looking back.
I've looked it up, ready? Surah 5:116, and behold, Allah will say, "O Jesus, the son of Mary, didst thou say unto men, take me and my mother for two gods beside Allah, and he will say, glory to thee, never could I say what I had no right to say. Had I said such a thing, thou wouldst indeed have known it. I don't know why I'm reading the Quran in King James English, but this is what came up. But essentially, yeah, I was right.
That was do that again. That was like an episode of Handmaid's Tale. That was actually fantastic, the way you were talking then.
I don't know why. I mean, why would you translate the Quran into King James English? I have no.
Because that's the only holy text in English.
It's a very niche market, isn't it? A very niche market.
It's good enough for me, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah. God spoke in King James English.
Like, we can go back to Jordan Peterson now. I apologise.
Oh,
I just
wrote it. There's a small question anyway. I think Jordan Peterson's been discussed when we talked with Dean, so I recommend checking out his stream. Otherwise, we end up just with regurgitating conversation. He's got a lot to say about good stuff, Jordan Peterson, but I don't know. I'm not sure if he's got an evangelistic approach. I'm not quite sure how to take that question. I think we're pretty much there. The last one is kind of about story. Although we've got one more question, literally just came in. Should we do one more question?
Yeah.
Go on.
Nothing else to do.
It's waiting for his takeaway.
It's true. Yeah, he's got his takeaway to come in.
I'm waiting for the doner kebab.
Go on, then. So here's one. We'll do two. There's two more. I'm sure you are all Lord of the Rings fans. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fan probably a bit strong, but I enjoy a good Lord of the Rings movie as much as anyone else. How useful is it as a metaphor for the Christian message? Have you ever tried taking a mate to a Lord of the Rings movie to convert them?
I don't think they'll go well.
You go.
Go on, Craig. You've got an opinion on it. Go on.
Well, I don't see it as clearly in Lord of the Rings as I see it in the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, in my defense, I read the books when I was about 10, and that's quite a long time ago. So I'm just relying on my memory of the films now. But although obviously there's glimmers of like hope and companionship and sort of the ring. I've got Zoom brain now.
No, it's all right. I've just distracted you with the programmer's comments, so I'm sorry about that.
The ring and the world that dominate and all that sort of thing. There are strands in there that you can go, well, that's like the gospel, and that's like the Bible, and that's like Jesus, and that. But you could do that with a lot of films.
Mm-hmm.
Not specific. Obviously, Tolkien was a Christian, and friends with Lewis and everything like that. And he originally wrote it as his own sort of version of like the Chronicles of Narnia, pointing to Jesus, pointing to the Bible. But I think there are so many other films you could do that with. So I don't think the film versions really sort of stand out as a representation of the gospel anywhere near. You look at like the obvious, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You've got the lion, and he says things, and you think that's pretty much straight out of Jesus' mouth.
He resurrects.
Yeah. He dies for Edward, who deserved to die, and
he dies for us,
sort of thing.
Yeah. Not very subtle, is it?
Do you know what's a good one?
Subtle, I mean.
Do you guys know Sentinel Apologetics?
No.
He does a lot of work with Heiser in America, and he done the Matrix series. He done a whole blog about how Christian the Matrix actually is. And you can't. I've watched the Matrix since after reading that, and you just can't get the Christian sort of imagery out of your head. It's worth a read if you ever get a chance. It's so Christian. It's unreal. The Matrix, the symbolism for it, and this whole storyline.
Yeah, no, I've definitely caught some of that from Matrix a while back. But are there like a series of books that are like Christian message in different films? I'm sure there's a bunch of them as well. Yeah. Maybe I'm overthinking things. Oh,
there is, yeah.
There's a dog.
Yeah, my dog's decided
big
to
dog.
He's been hiding.
It's that one from Harry Potter. It's the Grim. It's that
It's actually a wizard.
Yeah, it's the one who's escaped Azkaban.
Yeah. Go on. We're live. Oh, he wants to be let out. I'll better let him out. Someone else can do the talking. Go on, Andy.
How Movies Saved My Soul is a really good book about that. And in that, I can't remember what his name is. It's Gareth something. Gareth Higgins, maybe. And he says in this book, his argument would be, and my argument would be, an argument I respect and think we all should, is that the reason that you can find gospel imagery in so many stories is because there is only one meta-narrative in the universe, and that is God's redemption of the race of creatures he made a little lower than the angels. And that's a quote from Gareth Higgins' book. And so, like, I've got a whole series of blogs and some on my YouTube channel at Andy Kind Comedy, where I actually look at the gospel messages in Drive with Ryan Gosling, The Shining. Like, The Shining is like full of like stuff that you can use to point to the gospel. No Country for Old Men, unbelievably linked to the gospel. So, but it's because in the beginning was the Word. So God's story was wired into the universe. That's where everything started. So there's an argument to be made that every other story, inadvertently or not, is trying to grasp towards that thing wired right into the center of the cosmos. That would be what we would say. And it's most evident in, Lord of the Rings. It's most transparent in Lord of the Rings and Narnia, but actually it's there in loads of stuff. Not Time Cop, though. I've watched Time Cop 50 times looking for it, and you won't find it.
It's not there. Didn't C.S. Lewis talk a lot about this? About that all fiction, all stories point to I'm sure he did. Did say something about that?
He did.
Yeah.
It was very much one myth that's actually true.
Yeah, the true myth. Because I'm like the worst person. I don't get any of this. Like I could never watch a movie with a friend and try and identify. Like I can't. I don't read fiction because my brain. I don't have a brain that. Well, just take that. You could cut that, can you? I don't have a brain.
Yeah,
I think I might.
I don't have a brain that enjoys fiction or like narrative and story. Yeah,
you need to read Terry Pratchett books.
No, I don't. Honestly,
yes,
I've tried. I God has made me in such a way that I don't enjoy narrative. I don't enjoy it. I force myself once a year to read a fiction book. I have to force myself. Why would you waste? It is wasting 10 to 20 hours reading a novel when you could just watch a DVD in like 2.
Because you actually get the quotes and you can sound really clever when you're.
I've got a terrible memory and I'd never remember them.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't help you there. Here's another question. Would you judge one gospel as a better historical source? For example, I think Luke is a better historian than the other evangelists. I hope that's not blasphemous.
It is blasphemous.
It is, yeah. Sorry, burn the heretic.
Luke writes as a better historian.
Yeah.
It's not to say kind of identified as a historian, isn't he? So I know he's a doctor, but like he gives a lot more sort of geographical data. He gives a lot more social data. He gives a lot more information about roles and places and positions in society and things like that, just because of kind of the way that he was wired. So if you're looking for a historical book, Luke would be it. But I think at the same time, you'd be mistaken in treating it like you wouldn't be mistaken in treating it like a historical book because, okay. When you put it on YouTube, can you cut that bit out?
It's already on YouTube. It's live.
Mark's
here's the better historian because Mark is quite patchy and Matthew is thematically grouped and John is a lot more kind of poetic,
theological
in the way it's written. So yeah.
Some important questions have just come up. So. German Shepherd, done.
Dan's off.
Dan's got bored. He's just left the room. Yeah, he's got to get more food. I've lost all train of thought.
Where
You're getting Zoom brain. That's what you're
You
getting.
should fire questions at Phil. Ask Phil questions
about hell.
But I can do that.
I'm joking.
Just go to his YouTube channel. He talks about it for hours.
Hours, too long. Yeah, that's why I did
It
this
is good,
channel.
though. I don't want to say it's good stuff.
Can I ask
I appreciate
a
that, Dan.
question? Can I ask a question if it's not too much hassle?
You have to go to Pigeonhole.
No. What for you guys? What would you say is the most convincing standalone? So outside of a cumulative case, the most on its own most convincing argument for Christian theism.
Christian theism.
Yeah. So for instance, I think personally the
resurrection.
best argument for theism is the fine-tuning argument. I think that's a very, very strong argument for non-atheism, for theism of some kind, or at least a deism. Whereas I find the moral argument, and always have found it incredibly compelling for Christian theism, and actually just don't understand when people don't get it. But actually, it's the one that most people don't get the most. But I find it the most convincing, and I will fight them.
I think the moral argument is kind of middle of the road. I mean, it definitely provides a case
I
for
can't believe you're doing this to me a week before my birthday.
theism of a sort, but I don't think specifically Christian theism. I think specifically Christian. I think the historical case for the resurrection would be my go-to. As far as the weakest, and I may get shouted at. In fact, I probably won't get shouted at here. I get shouted at in a more philosophical one. But the one that I can't wrap my head around the applicability or usefulness of is the ontological argument.
Oh no, I mock that every week.
Special pleading to me. It's like we're going to define the maximally great being as God, and therefore he must exist. And I get on a logical, the way it's laid out logically, obviously is a logically compelling argument, but then the definition of a maximally great being is there's an element of subjectivity to it that I can't get away from. It's like maximally great in what? Well, he's the greatest in every possible way. Well, if you ask two people what the greatest being is, there's going to be an element of disagreement. It's like, well, why does he have to be perfectly good? Why can't he be perfectly wrathful? Why can't he be perfectly vengeful? Do you know what I mean? It's like they're almost trying to crowbar the biblical understanding of God into this maximally great being thing, and then say, by definition, he must exist.
Well, isn't that the evil God challenge to some extent from Stephen Law? Is just
Stephen Law.
Yeah. He's put out a challenge, and Cosmic Skeptic has recently put out a video of the challenge as well. Right. And it's been,
I didn't know what it was. So there you go.
It's basically the idea that it's gone. It's basically flipping the idea of a perfect
maximally evil being, sort of.
Maximally evil being. So you basically just join Stephen Law in that argument.
A short video on that. Inspiring Philosophy does a 10-minute comeback on why that can't be. That I watched it a few months back, but it was good. So if you're interested in
there's some interesting arguments against it, and I think Max Baker Hitch is actually meeting it on a academic paper as well. So there are people dealing with it. I'm not a big ontological, and that kind of argument generally doesn't thrill me. But and to answer your question, Andy, my go-to would be the resurrection. I think that's probably a fairly standard response. I don't find I like the fine-tuning argument. I quite like the moral argument, but I don't find they get you to Jesus or Trinity or the Christian concept of theism. They might be a doorway to getting over the barrier of does God exist, but you've then got an extra hurdle of why the Bible, why Jesus, and all that. So that'd be my response. Anything different, Dan?
No, I mean for specifically getting you to Christian theism, I think, the resurrection has always been something that has persuaded me and sustained me, because I can't, in all honesty, believe an alternative. I think all the alternative explanations are problematic, even though it's incredibly odd to consider a resurrection as being the case. But I'm persuaded that it is. In terms of sort of general arguments for theism, I think I like what Immanuel Kant said. He said there's two things that awe me most: the starry skies above me and the moral law within me. And I think they're two things that have always have been significant to me. I think the origins of the universe, I think points to some sort of originator, and the fact that we experience morality objectively, I think would be odd on naturalism. Like it is the case, and it makes better sense on theism than it does on naturalism. So I think that those two things, I think I find most persuasive.
Well, you got a fan, so.
Well, he says he's only becoming, so it kind of sounds like he didn't like me before, but his initial thing was, I don't really like him, but he's winning me over.
I'm sorry.
I'll take that than the opposite. But,
it's good. Is Dan good challenge? Cool. Sorry, was someone else going to say it?
No, you didn't say the contingency, really, anyone, but I think the contingency arguments are quite strong on a philosophy level, like the Kalam, things like that. But again, it doesn't get you to the Christian God, but it gets you to near enough like a all-powerful being who's, so it'd get you pretty much to the attributes of the God of the Bible without Jesus. But the resurrection, again, I would say, I think consciousness is one which I could talk to I think I mentioned to Phil and Dan last time I was on. Mm-hmm. I think it's one you can talk to like friends at work or atheists and say, isn't it incredible like how consciousness arrived out of like non-conscious beings, and everyone knows that's quite a hard problem on the naturalistic side, the consciousness. So it's a conversation starter, and it's points towards theism.
The thing about the philosophical arguments is they're really interesting, but I don't think I've actually bothered to read anything for like 5-6 years about them, because not because they're not interesting, but because whenever I've ever had a conversation with anyone, they've never come up since I was since I was at university, or if I went to like an unbelievable monthly event or something like that, then that would be the time that they would come up. But if I'm honest, they've never had any actual value in a conversation with someone. Never ever come up.
They're not evangelistic tools, are they? They're sort of the echo chamber kind of. Twitter is very big for them, and you get everybody arguing about them, and I think they're really handy things to kind of have in your toolkit and just have a sort of basic idea of them, and I think they can be useful. But like, you're not going to sit down with your friend in Starbucks and start talking about planting as modal expression of the ontological argument. You're going to talk about, but what do you believe happens, when you die? Or I think was it when Glenn Scrivener was on your channel, or did I see him on something else where he said he'd been at an event and there'd been an evangelist speaking, and they'd been fantastic, and they'd really sort of put forward a really compelling case for the gospel and everything like that. And he was sitting next to a guy at the back, and he said to the guy, "What did you make of all that?" And the guy said, "Well, I don't really know about any of that, but my grandfather died recently, and I've just got all these questions." Mm-hmm. And I think if you sort of start trying to wheel out the contingency argument then, or the ontological argument then, you're going to completely lose them. And they're not questions that people want answered, unless they're feeling particularly difficult, or they're fans of, relay theology or something.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, though, is that those philosophical conversations can't necessarily go anywhere other than around in circles, and someone can find the Kalam cosmological argument convincing, but someone else doesn't, and you can then argue about these premises all day long, as certain apologetic sites are doing currently. And though they are interesting and they have some interesting back and forth between Christians and atheists, it doesn't really get you anywhere. And from an evangelistic perspective, and maybe in some ways it's good for gaining friends who enjoy that back and forth at that level. So maybe there's, within at least philosophical circles, it shows that you are intellectually engaged and looking at that. But I think if we try and make that our consistent apologetic, we end up making apologetics and evangelism as this sort of intellectual, or jousting is the word that we've used on this channel. Dan's used that quite a lot. This kind of back and forth, but we don't actually get to Jesus. We don't actually get to the resurrection. We just end up talking about, well, does the world have a beginning? And what does that mean for a deity? Maybe. So I think there is a danger if we make that our main aim to discuss at a philosophical level.
I think it can build confidence when you know, like philosophers like William Lane Craig. When I first became a Christian and I heard of Craig and Moreland and Ed Fazer and all them guys, Habermas, and I realised there's really, really smart people who are Christians. Because when you're raised in England, as where we all are, in the UK, and from a secular background, you sort of dismiss Christianity. Well, I did anyway, as like a myth and like, yeah, that's for old people. That's a different old generation. Nobody takes it seriously anymore. And then it's just like to get into the philosophical arguments and see there's good groundings for your faith, intellectually as well as spiritually. It's quite comforting, as you say. But yeah, not to just talk to random people about the ontological argument, of course.
If you had the ontological argument, let me tell you about that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is, because I mean, like I found, under, finding out that Christianity was reasonable and could be a rational case could be made for it was absolutely instrumental in me becoming a Christian, because my general assumption was that Christians check their brains in at the door. Like it was literally, you couldn't be have common sense and be an intelligent person but also be a Christian. Like they were literally incompatible. And so, as I've talked about before, like when I went to my local library and found The Case for Faith by Lee Strobel, that I know we're talking about, I'm not calling it a miracle, but it's almost miraculous in the sense. I said that's better than most books you get in a Christian bookshop, let alone like your local library in Staines. So and that led me. I was like, I'm reading Gary Habermas, William Lane Craig. I can't remember. It's been a while. I haven't read it for probably 15 years, but it pointed me to Christians who made a rational case for faith, for belief in God and Christianity, and so it is so important. I think that the frustration I have is, it's not a frustration. I mean, I'm just not interested. In the same way I don't enjoy reading fiction, I find I force myself to read like philosophy of religion and things like that, because I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy thinking of God in that way, and even though I know it's important, and I think that's what I have like little or no interest in listening to people debate those sorts of arguments. It just doesn't. I don't find it interesting or satisfying. I'd much rather, more sort of existential things, or talk about the history of Christianity and
engage on that level.
I think what it does do, though, just quickly, is that, because I totally agree. I became a Christian and then got into C.S. Lewis and William Lane Craig, and I think for where I'm at now as a sort of performance apologist, but as also somebody who is out on the street sharing the gospel and engaging in some low-level charismatic wackiness in a British sense, of course, actually I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if I didn't feel that there was a rational basis for what I was doing. So the fact that I know these arguments, engage with these arguments, have read about these arguments, and trust that there's very clever Christians defending them very well, means that when I feel like I've got a word of knowledge, I don't just instantly think I'm insane. Or when I pray for someone and they experience heat and they say I've never seen it before, I don't just think that that's wacky pie in the sky. It's still maybe, but at least I have that foundation of, okay, well, I've done my research and now I'm on the battlefield. So yeah, it's part of the boot camp rather than the war. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. Well, as Santi's just said, yeah, it has been over 2 hours. We have still got a couple questions coming in, but I think I'm starting to get Zoom brain. I don't know about you guys, but I thought this question
weird because we're not on Zoom.
Well, the StreamYard brain, it doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it?
Oh, he's got terrible StreamYard, man.
Yeah, it just sounds like he's got an illness.
It's written on his face.
Here you go. Who wants to give some advice then? Mine's short, really. Go to church.
Yeah, and don't actually go looking for one.
Yeah, there's generally help.
Don't force it. It's like just
be normal.
Get on. The most important thing, I mean, this is advice for men and women as well. And the most important thing, I think, is to work on your relationship with Jesus first and carry on with your life. And I mean, I certainly wasn't looking for a relationship when I met my wife. I was helping out on a youth weekend and she was helping out on a youth weekend with her church. And, you know, I'd only been saved for like a year and I didn't have the faintest idea what I was doing. And then I managed to get her to marry me before she really knew what I was like. So that now. But yeah, don't go looking for. And obviously, like Phil said, go to church, work in a relationship with Jesus, serve, and here's the unpopular bit. There's lots of kind of advice about God's got the right man for you, God's got the right woman for you, you know, God's got the perfect one for you. Just got to wait. You might not. Mm. Sorry, keeping it light and everything, but you might reach a stage where you think, well, I've got to go one of two ways. I can either accept that I'm going to be single, possibly for a long time, possibly for the rest of my life, or I can marry a non-Christian. And I think you're opening up a can of worms there that you really don't want to open.
Mm. But also, I mean, that's
very happily married, but sorry, Andy.
No, well, so I'm sorry because I interrupted you, but I wanted to.
That's quite all right. I'm glad you did.
It's true, and like, work on your relationship with Jesus, and don't have any you don't deserve a spouse. But equally, if you are a bloke, if you are a Christian man in this country, you are. It's 4-1 in your favour. So, you know, if Christian people only marry Christian people, then only 25% of Christian women in the UK are going to find a husband. Whereas, you know, you could have, you could go a little bit Mormon. You could have 4 wives.
We're not recommending it.
Mormons.
I am recommending it.
It's not the kind of Christianity that we're promoting here, Andy.
The thing about the question is always interesting because it's really I find it fascinating because I had the same thought when I became a Christian. I had all I'd seen growing up: broken marriages, broken relationship, multiple marriages. And so my assumption was like, as a Christian, like you're just meant to get married and life's all works out. And it's weird how often Christians have this assumption. It's like Christians, they have to get married. And it really exposes this sort of idol of especially evangelical Christianity is that, you know, you can't, there's something insufficient about being a single Christian compared to, oh well, they're married, so they've got things together, or which is absolutely not true. You know, if you look back at throughout church history, you know, you see throughout that most of the people that we respected, you know, in terms of, you know, theological knowledge and influence on the church were single people. And we're absolutely there's no requirement to get married, or I don't. I have a real bee in my bonnet about this, so I'm not going to get too much into it. But I think we do. There's an expectation that real Christians get married, and that's just absolute nonsense. Is that there is that if we look at Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament, a single man, like that was ordained. God ordained that life for him, that he was serving God in that capacity without being married. And there are so many benefits, in terms of your ability, time, capacity to serve God in a way as a single person that you can't as a. Oh, you're putting the question up, aren't you, to show that I'm not actually answering the question?
Because right. I was trying to give context to your answer. So
I was thinking that's a very, very subtle.
Yeah, because at the moment it just looks like a slightly badly weighted speed dating night.
Yeah. but yeah. I mean, I don't say this as a hypocrite. I'm not single. I am married. But I just think it's wrong that Christians project a lot of guilt on Christians for what's this?
That's very good.
I think that's it. We've got it. There we go.
That's it. Ignore everything else we've said.
Yeah, we just can't be that. I mean, Dan was saying something very serious, but I think that one.
I think that's better advice.
Yeah, we've got another one similar. Yeah, contingency argument on the first date. Well, at least you'll know if they're a keeper or not, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, just try alpha. Try alpha. That's what I would say.
Try alpha, yeah. Or try prayer, whichever one you want.
Yeah.
Both.
Find a Christian hashtag, and you'll find a Christian girl not far away.
If you're English, go to America as well. It's a great one.
The accent helps.
Love the English accent.
Yeah. Cool. I think that derailed that one. Right. Last one, which we usually, because I need to go. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm actually working tomorrow. I don't know about you guys. So, last question, which we ask every live stream: top 3 books or podcasts or anything that you're listening to. Andy Kind, go.
Top 3 books. That one by Rebecca McLaughlin is still brilliant. Atheist Who Didn't Exist by Andy Bannister is the closest thing we've got to a funny apologetics book. I do really like the Inspiring Philosophy guy. He's very impressive. But I also like Philosophize This. It's actually not a Christian podcast, but it is really good for giving a history of philosophy, and I listen to that a lot, and I find that very helpful in terms of putting some of the stuff in context. So Philosophize This, Inspiring Philosophy. Who cares?
listen to this stream. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys, Critical Witness, everyone, check it out. Santi's channel is really good as well. I know he's watching. Adherent Apologetics, Zach, he does good interviews as well. And I'm not just saying it because I'm friends with all 4 of you, but put them forward. Right. Book-wise, like I said before, I like The Resurrection of the Son of God, N.T. Wright. William Lane Craig on God, good for beginners in apologetics. That's a brilliant book for that. And yeah, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, Richard Balcombe, another great history.
Have you finished it yet?
No, I'm getting distracted with other books, but I'm still really enjoying it. But it's one of them I'm going to read quite a few times, I imagine. It's
quite technical at places. So like, there's a table of names. Skip.
Yeah, holding tables. Yeah.
It means you get through quite large chunks on your Kindle fairly quickly. Sorry, Dan, I used a bad word with Kindle there. Go on, Dan. Top 3 books, podcasts.
I can't think of top 3, but I think of 3 good books that I think every Christian read. It probably says more about my interests, but Reinventing Jesus, I think is such a great book. I think its subtitle is Reinventing Jesus: How Contemporary Skeptics Miss the Real Jesus and Mislead Popular Culture. And that's by Kobmazewski and Daniel Wallace and James Sawyer. And I think it's an absolute must read. I think it's one of the best Christian books for those who are interested in apologetics and evangelism. Another one would be a book by Gilbert Mylender called Bioethics: A Primer for Christians, and another one would be The Case for Life by Scott Klusendorf. And Christian podcast, Mere Fidelity is a great podcast, and non-Christian one which I just love. Well, it's not. Malcolm Gladwell, Revisionist History.
Good, yeah, that's good. Yeah, Craig, what about you?
Podcast. To be honest, I've never really gotten into the whole podcast thing. I'm afraid. Sorry to let you down and everything.
It's all good.
And what I generally do, I mean, YouTube channels. I generally watch, you guys, and Santi's good. And apart from that, I just watch sermons and things on YouTube mostly. Books wise, I'd probably say for a good just sort of overview, general, getting the basic philosophical arguments into your toolkit kind of apologetics book, I'd say Douglas Groothuis, his book, Christian Apologetics, is a whopping big thing, but it sort of gives you like a good outline of all the basic arguments. The Forgotten Trinity by James White, I really like as well. That's a good one about the Trinity. And the other one, I'd say actually, because I'm, the whole Jehovah's Witness thing, one book that kind of completely changed my view of it. Sorry, I won't go on for too long, but
it's all good. You can go.
One book that completely changed my view of it. When I first sort of started to get into like talking to Jehovah's Witnesses and things, I heard about a book called The Crisis of Conscience. I don't know if you've heard of that or read it, but it was written by a guy who used to be like a real sort of senior member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. He was in the headquarters in New York and everything. And I heard about this book. It's sort of being like a big whistleblowing thing. And I thought I'll get that book because it'll be full of really good like arguments that I can use against Jehovah's Witnesses. And, I can really sort of undercut them from a guy who's in the inside and a guy who knew what was going on. And what it turned out to be was it tells you his story, and it tells you about how they basically destroyed him from the inside out because he'd invested his entire life and in working for the Watchtower, and they basically just dropped him, just knifed him. And it was the first book that I read that made me realize these guys are not like arguments to be won. These guys who come around, knock on your door on a Saturday morning, they're deceived and they're people, and the way that they're treated by the Watchtower is awful, and it's heartbreaking. And it kind of made me realize that it made me more passionate about reaching them, really. And it really opened your eyes to how important it is that we sort of love them, understand them, rather than slam the door in their face. So yeah, that would be my top pick, Crisis of Conscience by Raymond Friends.
I have to look that one up. That's quite interesting. Mine, I think where I'm at the moment is just getting a better grasp of what the Bible actually is, what the story actually is saying, and half the apologetics issues that I encounter are more just cultural issues or misunderstandings with the old document and just not sure how to read it. So kind of my recommendations have shifted quite a lot. If you're going to just kind of challenge people, instead of going into apologetics arguments, invite people to read the Bible. There's these great little one-to-one Bible studies called The Word One-to-One. I'd really recommend you check out the website. And they're small, so that it's not like you're bringing the whole Bible to your mate and saying, let's read this thing, and they get intimidated. It's like 3 chapters of John, and you've got notes in there that are really just small pointers as to help you read through it with a friend. And so stuff like that, I just kind of challenge people, see what God's word does when you're interacting with people. Good Bible overview. I've read a couple recently. God's Big Picture by Vaughan Roberts, I think it is. I can't remember what it is. Look up God's Big Picture. Get an understanding of Genesis to Revelation. Bible Project podcast and videos are awesome. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of listening. recommend Mere Fidelity, and This Cultural Moment's pretty big as well, with a guy named John Mark Comer and Mark Sayers from Australia talking about where we're at in terms of Christian evangelicalism, particularly, but how we got here and what cultural things we really need to look at and engage with. So those are my recommendations. Slightly different, slightly less philosophical, but hopefully, I think they've helped my faith considerably. Guys, it's been a epic 2 hours 25 this evening. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Good to see you all.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks all for the comments, the likes, the shares, the questions. I think top questioner goes to the programmer. I'm going to assume most of those on the pigeonhole are from you, but also I think some good questions from Callum, and finding truth with the most popular question. So thanks everyone for getting involved, sticking around, and if you've enjoyed it, subscribe, share. Feel free to check out the Patreon stuff. But otherwise, we'll be here because we enjoy it, and it's what we do.
We should do this again in the new year.
Yeah, we will.
300 subscribers.
300. Yeah, we'll do it every 100.
Every 100. Yes, we do that. Every 100, we have to just
I'm up for that.
Yeah.
You're like 220 already, aren't you? Something like that.
It's 220. Yeah, so we're not far.
Could be next week.
We'll be here in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
Setting up these fake YouTube accounts.
Yes, I need to stop registering. Yeah, so the last stream, just so people, we're here next Thursday at 8 p.m. with Jay Smith. So
And Sunday.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Dan, without me, because I'm busy, is talking to someone who knows stuff about vaccines, and what they are and what they aren't. And so that's going to be an interesting conversation on Sunday evening as well. So some bonus stuff coming out on the channel over the next week.
It might not be as technologically smooth as your ones, but it will be interesting. So we've got Dr. Jocelyn Downey, who is a scientist who'll be talking about vaccines. So we'll be throwing all the tough questions, is the Pfizer vaccine the mark of the beast? Yeah,
everyone knows that it is.
Obviously.
All that. Cool. All right. Well, I'll end the broadcast. So check us out Sunday evening, next Thursday evening, 8 p.m. And then we're going to take a break over New Year's. But we'll see you around. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.